Part 5. The Approach Theory. The Sun planet's role in the Paradise Machine model. The Paradise Machine model suggests that the location to Femi life forms should be behind the event horizon in black holes. Hence, according to the Paradise Machine model, the Sun planet should have at least 3 functions in the Paradise Machine, figure 18. Since the closest black hole to Earth, Gaia BH1, has been estimated to be approximately 1,560 light-years away, a preliminary assumption about the minimum distance the Femi life forms would need to travel to get here has been established. Assessing their distance should fall beyond the scope of this article, but approximately 1,560 light-years could be considered the nearest distance if Gaia BH1 is the closest black hole. This is in line with the Paradise Machine model, which posits that advanced life forms naturally reside beyond the event horizon of black holes. Moreover, as discussed in Part 3, advanced life forms likely have the capability to travel through wormholes, which may be functionally analogous to the tunnels, Kurzurgo-spheres, leading to the various paradisiacal states in the Paradise Machine model, figure 14. Other predicted Femi life forms in fourth law approaching Earth. This article is expected to be the conclusion in the series on the fourth law. In this final part, I intend to reflect on and identify potential signal patterns that can be traced back to the inception of the fourth law in 2006, and to reflect on if the signal pattern has increased in strength from 2005. Suggesting that the source of the signal gradually is getting closer over time. In other words, suggesting that a higher form of intelligence has become interested in us and is approaching Earth. To identify such a signaling pattern will help to support the approach theory, suggesting that the so-called Femi life forms have identified our location in the universe and are shortening their distance to us. For now, I will assume that they are actively approaching us and not the other way around. See also figure 28. The main point with the approach theory is that the distance between our 2 life forms is decreasing and that their approach was triggered via the zero-risk signal. In hindsight, it might be that the discovery of the fourth law has resonated with a zero-risk triggering mechanism in nature. The approach theory therefore starts by suggesting that what has sparked the birth of fourth law to begin with has been the triggering of a zero-risk mechanism in nature. The casino rationale in nature. What has never been mentioned in this article series is that I was very occupied with the concept of a zero-risk mechanism in nature years before the inception of fourth law in 2006. Hence, after the zero-risk signaling concept was brought up in the third article, this story from the years prior to 2006 has become extremely relevant. Over 20 years ago, in 2002, I decided to launch an art project which aim was to trigger a stress signal in nature as a response to zero risk in the struggle for survival game. This initiative was inspired by the vision of an invisible but existing zero-risk detection mechanism embedded in nature. The idea was that a low-risk detection mechanism was embedded in nature to protect itself from being dominated by emerging life forms. Nascent life forms which managed to cheat in the struggle for survival game in nature's casino. This rationale was based on a casino scenario and how a casino owner would look at this cheating situation. Imagining that nature itself had a casino owner, envisioned as being nature's ego, which task was to protect its casino from having the odds turned against the house. In order for this scenario to come alive, it was crucial that nature did have an ego hidden somewhere in its system. A hidden ego in nature which we could not see. The idea was to rewoke this hidden ego by creating a zero-risk situation in the struggle for survival. This situation should be reminiscent to let cheaters enter a real casino, cheaters that manage to turn the odds against the house, collecting money with no risk. This situation should be a stressful situation to any owner of a casino, as the casino would go bankrupt if it was not able to deal with the newly introduced cheaters. However, I kind of forgot about this zero-risk project as the years went by. At least for the next 10 years, I waved it off as a wild project which probably did not work. Besides, the discovery of the fourth law in 2006 gradually occupied my mind, which made the memories of the zero-risk project from 2002 more distant. However, while writing the third article in 2017, the theme of a zero-risk detection mechanism was brought up again, but now relating the concept to the logics in fourth law. Could it be that the zero-risk art project from 2002 actually worked? That a hidden ego in nature had responded to a zero-risk situation? The question related to the approach theory 20 years later has now risen. Has the article series on fourth law itself been one of nature's responses to the wild zero-risk art project from 2002? To be honest, I never truly believed that the wild idea of wakening nature's ego by creating a zero-risk situation would ever work. It was solely based on an abstract principle, the casino owner rationale. Secondly, if it did work, I could never imagine that nature's response would come in the form of a theory. A theory I felt was my own work. The initial idea back in 2002 was simply to compare nature's ego to the ego of a casino owner. The rationale with the zero-risk project in 2002 simply was, if I go down with zero risk, nature must go down with me. Artwork from the project in Figure 20. Hence, the idea was that the project could create a new alliance between me and nature, if nature did have a security mechanism against zero-risk situations, that is. The approach theory probably makes or breaks fourth law. If the predictions in the article series on fourth law originates from me, I very much doubt that all of the ideas in the series are true, as it is not realistic that one person, an amateur in science, manages to solve what would be the theory of everything, correctly describing the purpose behind the universe. Conversely, if the concepts presented in this series of articles are derived from nature, it is likely that all the ideas in the series are accurate, including the Paradise Machine model itself, as well as the approach theory presented in this part of the article. In conclusion, what makes or breaks fourth law's validity probably boils down to if a zero-risk mechanism did trigger a stress signal in nature. If so, the question is if there was a receiver of this signal somewhere in nature. Exactly where is nature's ego located in the universe? The suggestion is if the receiver or receivers of the signal was the life forms Fermi referred to. It is therefore interesting to dwell some more on this topic, as this scenario probably is what makes or breaks all the theories in the article series on fourth law. The approach process should have started with a stress signal. From the viewpoint of the Paradise Machine model, the 2002 Zero Risk Art project effectively pushed a button in the Paradise Machine. This pivotal event would have coincided with the moment nature recorded a successful zero-risk strategy on Earth. The theory suggests that this may have occurred in 2005. Furthermore, that the zero-risk signal triggered an approach process that even could end in becoming a physical approach by the so-called Femi life forms, more details to why later. This envisioned button could have started a new program module in the machine, similar to activating a switch in an else-if function in a computer algorithm. This scenario illustrated in Figure 19 implies that, as long as a zero-risk signal has not been received by Fermi's life forms, the Paradise Machine will stay idle, hence, the Femi life forms themselves will stay behind. It is likely that they are unaware of our existence until the zero-risk signal is received. Conversely, once a zero-risk signal is detected, the machine, or nature, is theorized to initiate a significant operation. In this scenario, the hypothetical button within the Paradise Machine may have triggered the commencement of a subsequent production phase, advancing the preconceived production process of the eternal paradise state to its next stage. Whatever that next stage is. At this point in the article, it is necessary to prepare the reader for considerable speculation. The reader should exercise their own judgment to determine the credibility of the speculations presented. Now, back to the envision button in the machine. The newly activated program module in the machine would probably start by first locating where the zero-risk signal originated from. Furthermore, and then follow this information up by physical approaching the target, Figure 26 and 28. To fully control whatever the machine sees as a serious threat to the machine's ego, or nature's ego if you like. Since their major issue, according to the zero-risk argument, should be to take full control over the newly detected threat in the machine, and possibly to copy everybody on Earth over to the Mathematical's Paradise format, suggested in the third article. See also the YouTube video discussing the Einstein-derived version of fourth law. Maybe they want to copy us before their arrival becomes apparent. Anyhow, the main task for all the machine's operations should be to produce the paradise state presented in the Paradise Machine model. The details on how this goes about is out of scope for this article, except for the initial phase of the process, the zero-risk detection mechanism. However, some questions are possible to raise concerning details in the initial response to the zero-risk signal. For example, is this article series part of the first activated modules in the Paradise Machine's algorithm? Furthermore, was the unique whispering episode in 2005, "You Are a Genius," just part of a routine of the very first strings in the machine's software program, as some sort of confirmation that the location of the stress signal now had been located? Much like our own Hello World tutorial routine when we start to learn a software program. Furthermore, since this now what is assumed to be the first signal in the approach module took place over 20 years ago, the distance between us and the Femi life forms should now be much closer, as it means they have had about 20 years to approach us since the first signal in 2005. They are probably able to send stronger signals the closer they get. For example, eventually to move physical objects as is suggested in the third incident, by timing the entrance of an interstellar object into our solar system in 2017. Hence, the point being made is that the very first whispering signal in 2005 was the strongest signal they could send at the time. Currently, I am making this assumption about the so-called whispering event to facilitate the presentation of the remaining part of the approach theory, although I cannot substantiate this unique event with hard evidence. Nevertheless, I narrated this particular episode in the Paradise Women story around the year 2015. Still, the "you are a genius" phrase seemed nonsense even then. The point then was that the gentle female voice was identical to the first Paradise Women who approached me lying in bed after the EU equals 0 equals Paradise formula was written down, about 6 months later after the whispering episode. The sentence didn't mean anything in particular, because this was before the writing of the third article and the zero-risk signaling idea in 2020. However, within the framework of the approach theory, this enigmatic sentence from the whispering episode in 2005 could have been alluding to the zero-risk project conceived in 2002, a few years earlier. If this art project had indeed succeeded, it would have been quite a stroke of genius, or luck, if you like. Therefore, if we presume the zero-risk project of 2002 was successful, the exclamation "you are a genius" may not seem so peculiar after all. It could very well be the one short signal they chose to send as their initial response to receiving the zero-risk signal. At least in this new context it makes some sense. On that note, the zero-risk project in 2002 stemmed from a desperate life situation, and to be honest, it is not something I am very proud of. It wasn't like I did it because I thought it was a smart thing to do in itself. As I saw it at the time, there were no other choice. Anyway, this scenario now also raises the question, is the whole article series on fourth law a signal in itself? If this article series on fourth law is one of nature's first response to a zero-risk signal, it is probably for the machine to buy time by informing its friends on Earth of the situation they are in. They probably also gather intel on their natural rivals with the goal of controlling them completely. These are suggested operations that must be one of the most important tasks, just based on the zero-risk argument. This chain of arguments then culminates in a full-fledged approach theory. That the advanced life forms Enrico Fermi referred to decades ago might not only exist out there, but they might now even approach us. Meaning that the solution to Fermi's paradox is that the advanced life forms he referred to always have been sitting quiet somewhere in the universe, just waiting for a zero-risk signal to initiate their approach process, figure 19. The best analogy is probably to compare the situation to a spider which sits idle in its web listening to a stress signal from a prey from anywhere in its web. As the spider receives a stress signal, the spider will approach the prey. Just that this time around, the spider should come to continue the production of the planned paradise state. Furthermore, that the very first signaled in 2005 will continue as a cascade of stronger signals as the distance shortens and might end up in a physical presence, figure 27. The latest figures depicting envisioned spaceships transporting Fermi life forms have been generated by the newest version of Grok 2, which was specifically requested to incorporate all information on X pertaining to this subject. It's interesting because this fourth article was written on the X platform and seemed to have influenced the AI-generated illustration. These illustrations might be more accurate compared to the first illustration used in the written version of the article. For example, the Grok 2 version seems to include women of varying colors and shapes. More on this at the very end. Anyhow, the approach theory is perhaps the boldest prediction in the whole article series so far. Scientifically speaking, it is based on relatively vague data, such as details in the Paradise Women story and the so-called signal incidents listed later. In summary, the mind-blowing suggestion is that, without my knowledge, the ideas presented in this article series, ever since 2010, has been planted in order to launch fourth law on Earth, as being one of the first responses to a zero-risk signal, suggesting that fourth law is not really mine. This process of unknowingly planting ideas in a human brain was inspired by the Oumuamua incident presented later. It has never occurred to me before, as all the ideas on fourth law, ever since the first article, has felt like being my own ideas. However, when the ideas for the third paper popped up in my head simultaneously to Oumuamua near Earth, changed my thinking somewhat. Did they try to say something with this timing of events? Placing the nearing of the first recorded interstellar object with the content in the third article. This, since the third article basically describes the reason for their approach, describing how a zero-risk strategy in the struggle for survival generates a signal for zero risk in the quantum world. This connection can be documented by using computer timestamps, ref. The third incident later. If the machine is able to plant ideas in our heads in 2017, maybe the earlier ideas on fourth law arrived in the same manner, even starting with the first article in the series. As always, I ask the reader or listener to make his or her judgment of how relevant this suggestion is. I know it's a mind-blowing idea, and one part of me does not like it, but what can we expect if we are encountering advanced life forms? To be honest, it seems as if they are trying to approach us in the most pleasant manner, not wanting to scare us. My guess is that if the approach theory is correct, they will continue to be pleasant in their approach also in the remainder of their approach, as these advanced life forms is probably very, very nice and gentle life forms. They are probably much nicer than we are, which also is in accordance with the basics in fourth law. They should be of higher concentrations of love and intelligence. Furthermore, this gentle beginning of their approach, assuming if it's real of course, is also why the approach theory predict how the physical meeting will be. If we are ever going to meet them, they will probably come in all types of skin colors and shapes, not wanting to exclude anyone, in an attempt to make the meeting as pleasant as possible. Even now the approach theory is highly speculative. At least these so-called suggested signal incidents listed later can all be documented by using computer timestamps, so not to sow additional doubts in the theory. When it comes to the Paradise Women story, I can also document its online publishing date by using computer timestamps, to document that this story was written many years prior to launching this article. As some of the details in the Paradise Women story is used to support some of the ideas that are now launched in the Paradise Machine model. In a way, the Paradise Women story could be the only data there is from behind the event horizon, which stories surprisingly confirm many things in the Paradise Machine model. It is therefore important to document that this story has not been shaped to fit the Paradise Machine model presented today.